wanted to get back to your presentation, and do you know what some of the takeaways would have been for people that were there? Did you get any feedback from them, things that they learned? There was some feedback that said they'd heard some of the things, but the majority of people were quite excited about what you offered. So if you can talk a little bit to the audience
Well,
you spent time with and what they got out of it.
you'd have to interview 27 coaches to find out what they got out of it. But I mean, there were a lot of coaches came up to me during the break. There were probably 3 or 4 came during the break. The break was supposed to be 3 or 4 minutes, turned out to be a lot longer because of the questions. And at the end too, asking about it. One fellow who I've known for a few years because his kid is now U12, I think, AAA. This kid is a tremendous player, but I didn't know he was a fitness instructor and does CrossFit training. He was the one that, but when you look at the evaluations there, Wally, he's the one that wrote a whole thing about fitness, the fitness component as one of the 6 elements in SEEP. The feedback, I contacted the Oshawa president and the development guy, Tony, sometime after to find out what they had heard, and they had heard nothing but positive things, and the coaches really wanted to have a follow-up in August to figure out how to use this, how to incorporate these elements into their practices better. So like I said earlier, the timing was awkward because it was during the pre-tryout skate period, and everybody's minds were on how do I get on the ice with my kids and do the pre-tryout tryout type of thing. The feedback you saw in the evaluations, I think, was pretty accurate. I'm not so sure people were truthful about having seen some of this stuff before. I mean, when I asked that question at the beginning of the evening, what are the 4 roles? Plugging Tom's work, and no hands went up. I went, okay, this is going to be a little bit longer evening. This is going to be a little bit more of a challenge than I'd expected. And in coaching clinics, everybody knows better. Everybody knows what a breakout is. Oh yeah, we got to do breakouts and we got to do forecheck, but they didn't know about the research. So when I asked them, how do you apply this? What does game like mean? And what the last slide, I think you've got it, or second to last slide, you've got it there, Wally, had the word communication across the top. I said there's actually 7 elements, because how we communicate these 6 elements is essential. Just having them is not good enough. When I asked that question, what is the missing element that governs all 6 of these? There were a couple of coaches right up at the front who threw their hands up and said, well, communication. And in fact, one of the AAA coaches has asked that I work with him next season in developing this. He's a little bit of a new, well, I wouldn't say a new coach, but he's certainly new to AAA. So we'll see. But the feedback was very positive. Now it's a matter of what are you going to do with it? I came away from it as convinced as I ever was that, with very few exceptions, the vast majority of minor hockey coaches want to learn, want to be educated, want to be informed, and want to get better, way beyond the coaching certification content, which is pretty thin. It's a lot thinner now than it was 20 years ago or 40 years ago. That they want to get better because they mean well. They put in all these hours as coaches in order to get their kids better, not necessarily because they're going to win a championship. I think everybody recognizes only one team does it, but because they just feel that I want to be a better coach. I want to be able to provide my kids more and educate the parents along the way.
The thing that amazes me is they make the decision to take it on. And that to me is they're in. And can they swim or not? But they learn to tread water, and they learn to, advance. But I I find all of us in our position, like you, Richard, you're trying to work with coaches at the level they're at and provide some input in terms of what meets their needs and what do they need to do. And this is what frustrates me because there's some things that are just fundamentally obvious. And tactical skating, for instance, when you play a game, the evasive tight turn is critical. But that has to be taught. And I know Hal, he talked about teaching skating, and that's one of his strengths. And that specialty ability to teach skills, I think, was more evident in our day of coach development than it is today. So that's where I tend to lean to, and I don't like saying this, just play games,
No.
but I do because they can't teach the skills they need to do within the games in a manner that's going to be productive.
Well, I don't think coaches are equipped, knowledgeable, trained, educated in the technical part of the game in the same way that, some of us were. I mean, I learned under a guy named Gaston Marcotte in Montreal. That's my background is as a technician, a skating technician. Wally, you're smiling. You must know Gas from way back. Howie Meeker, those kinds of people that I taught with, long ago. So I have a technical background, but not for a moment would I ever, or would I ever go into a practice and say, oh, here's how you do a sharp turn. That's not what hockey practices are for. They have to learn how to play the game, which is not to say we don't show the kids or ask the kids on the side as they're waiting their turn in a game or a drill. Okay, show me what you do with your feet. Do you think that in 10 minutes, as I asked the coaches in Oshawa, do you think that in the 10 minutes or 15 minutes or 20 minutes you're setting aside for this game that involves a lot of turning, that you're going to make the kids who can't do a tight turn to the right be better in 15 or 20 minutes? And then next week, come back to them. There's a slide on the forgetting curve. There's a great chapter in the book, Doug Lemov's book, The Coach's Guide to Teaching, which is outstanding, about the forgetting curve and how people forget what they've been shown. If you have kids play tag in a practice, as one example, they all have to change direction. So one guy said to me, well, but they have to be able to change direction with different ways. I said, they'll change direction according to the needs of the moment. In the same way as in a game, you change direction, stop or turn according to the needs of the moment. We can fine tune that in another environment. But in the middle of a hockey practice, let's not confuse what we do in a hockey practice with what is done in a summer skating, summer hockey school, or a specialty development session. That's a different argument. I don't want to get into those weeds either. I'm talking about hockey practices. You have one 50-minute practice a week. How are you going to engage those kids? Like every association I've talked to in the last few years while living out here in the Whitby area, they all say their numbers are down. Girls' numbers are way down. In Whitby, the girls' numbers in House League are down 25%. COVID, I don't know, whatever the reason is. So how do you engage kids in practice to get them to really want to play the game? It certainly isn't by standing, going up and down the rink, holding the stick up in the air and trying to balance it as you're doing a stride like I've seen one instructor do. How do you get them to play? Well, play. Children learn through play. We've become way too technical, way too engaged in hold your stick this way and turn your head that way and play. Let's play. And if we stop calling them players and stop calling them kids and started calling them children, I think people would look at things a little bit differently. That's my rant.
Hell, I don't know how much of it you've heard, but you've been there, done that, and they're still doing it too. You have anything to offer relative to what we've been talking about and whatever you've heard?
Well, I don't know if it's relevant, but I'll comment. I was just typing it up in here, but with only one practice a week, I agree 100% with you, Richard. They just need to play. Where I am, we practice 3 or 4 times a week. And so in my career, what I have found is that if I can improve their skating skills by 10%, that they play at a much higher level. I mean, because the game is so much skating oriented. But again, going back to what Wally said, how many coaches are even capable of doing that? And I've been accumulating a lot of videos that I get from what's his name in Drop Off or one of these Russian guys and the skating stuff they do, and the stuff from Bukac, and they're just little short clips. And I'm sort of accumulating these because I think you can use those clips to help kids say, "Wow, look at that! Let's get out on the ice and try this." I saw a really cool drill the other day, which is heavily skating, but it's a puck protection sort of keep away game. And my opinion from a few years of coaching, like 50, is that if the kids don't get the right skating skills, they don't learn to use their outside edges because nobody's really talked to them about it very much. It severely limits their options to play a puck possession game because they can't, they can't do reverse turns confidently without slowing so far down that they get caught. So I was talking to a group the other day and saying, if you can improve your team's ability to skate by just focusing on it. Now, for us, if we skate 4 days a week in practice, just 10, 15 minutes, maybe every other day, and just kind of keep going back and going back and going back to it. Doesn't take very long for their whole skating ability to come up. Now they can play better. My opinion is if you don't skate very well, you're not balanced. If you're not balanced, you can't stick handle very well. If you're not in good balance, you can't shoot the puck worth a darn. You're just using your wrists and your arms. So it all comes back to skating well and good hockey position. And for youth coaches, I've got all these videos I did, and I ran into a guy last week because I'm the skills director for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing program, sponsored by the Minnesota Wild. And a coach came out and we introduced each other, and he goes, "Oh yeah, I've watched all your videos about 20 times." and he says, 100% true. So, but if you have limited ice time, I would just let them play too. I mean, it's just because now Wally and being on this call, I was talking recently about the format of soft skills, hard skills, game skills. And the soft skills is the beginning of practice. We scrimmage, cross ice, whatever that looks like, because that's why the kids come to practice. They want to play hockey. And so you let them play hockey on clean ice, not as a reward for working hard with the other segments, but let's do this first and let's wear them out a little bit. It's like, I'll talk too long here, but I used to ride performance quarter horses. And before you go into the show ring, you ride that horse around for about 20 minutes, just, in a warm up ring to take them down just a notch, just to get them loosened up, to get them focused. The kids want to play hockey. I get it. And numbers are, even where we are is a problem. So anyways, I'll stop now, but thanks for asking, Wally.
I'm not suggesting that we just throw them out on the ice and just, do playtime.
Yep.
Like, you're talking about, I agree with you about the skating is absolutely essential. That's what makes the sport, unique.
Yeah.
That, every other team sport is played on their feet, except for water polo.
Yeah.
And just getting the horses to learn how to swim in that is really, really challenging. So that was a joke. by the way. Okay, never mind.
I got
So every other sport is played on their feet. With hockey, of course, you have to be able to skate. So if you look at, I'll take one example of angling drills activities. Any angling drill that involves a corner of the rink where you have to turn involves using the edges. So the kids have to try it, but they can't try it twice. They have to try it 15 times. So, like as I said to the coaches in that session in April in Oshawa, I'm not saying that a practice plan should have 6 stations of 10 minutes each station or 5 minutes each station. What I'm suggesting is that you think about, if you want to teach angling and you feel that angling and breaking the puck carrier's stride and stick checking and all those other things are a necessary tool for your children to have, then they have to be able to turn. How do you get them to turn when they're angling? How are you going to create the affordances or the constraints in the activity to force them to turn without actually knowing how to teach turning yourself? Because coaches are not equipped to do that. You are, Hal. I am. Some of us on this call could do it, but I'm not going to do it in the middle of practice. And our coaches do not have 4 practices a week. If you have 4 practices a week or 3 practices a week, you could make an argument, I think, that, yeah, you could set aside 20 minutes in each practice, and over the course of 3 weeks, you could see an evolution, an improvement in certain skating skills. But the key is the application, the game-like application, to get the kids to understand that if I want to take a player out in the corner of the rink, I am going to have to angle that player. I have to be able to be on the outside edge of my front skate, et cetera, et cetera. And with that, Hal took a call.
Just wanted to comment on the skills. When I scouted for the national team and I would watch NCAA and CIS teams practice, there was a tradition back in our day where, and I'll ask the question, what did the coaches have their players do between drills? It was quite common.
Take a lap.
nothing.
2 hard laps. So you could go to the board, you could get set up for them to come in. So when I was watching the players skate between laps, they couldn't skate. They had no knee bend. Their feet, their heels were coming up behind them off the ice. There was no side push. Their sticks were too long. They couldn't forward stride and glide. So all I did in the curriculum was 2 technical laps and sent out a video of Danielle Goyette doing it at every practice with the national team. When she stepped on the ice, she got it from the speed skating coach who became her skating coach, Sylvie Bernier, who went 2 fluid long stride glide laps. And that was sort of the beginning of skills between drills. But now, Richard, I might say skills between games.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, because I came up with this brilliant, and I'm sure it's going to be lighter in everybody's rooms as a result of this comment, but that, I call them in-betweens. So if you have a practice with 5 activities, that means you would have 4 in-betweens. And instead of just taking a lap, in the girls program in Whitby, where I was for a couple of years, I told the coach, I didn't tell them very much, but I did tell them this: your girls cannot turn to the right. They cannot turn clockwise. For those of you who understand what a clock looks like, they could not turn to the right. So when you have them go around the rink, have them go always to the right to try to correct that problem. But the in-betweens, and I wrote these out, and if anybody wants them, I can send them to you. But I gave a whole list of in-betweens you can do individually, in pairs, in
Yeah.
groups of 3, groups of 5, where you could do any number of skills for, let's say, 30 seconds. So go around the face-off dots, the outside face-off dots in the rink, and I want you to run on your skates 1 to 2 strides on each side with a puck as you go. As one example, there's an unlimited number of things you could do. Carry the puck, pull it back to your skates, kick it back up. You're doing 2 laps of that while I'm setting up the next thing or talking to the coach. In other words, it would be different every time, or every practice, I should say, but it would be related to the skills that the kids need. So I said that, therefore, we're providing them a little bit of skills instruction. It's only for 2 minutes in a practice, 4 times 30 seconds, doing 2 laps for a bunch of kids, but it's not wasted time. The take a lap thing, that's 50 years ago. That's from coaches who are in a different era. It has long since passed its best before date. Drop it. Don't do it. Forget it. There are better things we can do between exercises, games, whatever you want to call it. And coaches were doing it. They said, this is great. It works great. The kids are motivated, and we needed to work on our passing. You got to pass with the partners. You're going around the rink, and they did it.
Richard, related to that, Dan Church, who coached the national team during a centralized period, coached at the University of York University.
Yeah, he's still there. Yep.
He developed, he wrote down a sequence of skills between drills, exactly what you're talking about.
Right.
Because back in that era, that was, and it's brilliant, with pucks, without pucks, striding and pivoting and
Yeah, I did the same thing. Yep. Yep.
All those things. He built it in versus making it a long type of boring repetition. It was
right.
snuck in, and I like your term, in betweens. I'll give everyone a suggestion here at the novice level. They're playing whole ice hockey back in the day. They're having to learn to check, and we always taught front foot stops, T starts. I mean, that's fundamental to the game of hockey. Nobody does. They do a stop and crossover, and usually it's their favorite side. But when you send kids for a drink of water, have them do a right foot, left foot snowplow, and a 2-foot snowplow, just lightly. And you know what? I'd do that with an NHL team pregame warm up, just so they feel the edges. And Dave King's teaching phrase, toe cap square. So if you can keep your toe cap square moving to the left, toe cap square moving to the right, and don't overturn, you can skate without the puck.
One of the things that coaches in the Oshawa presentation, one of the things I started with was explaining to them that, you can go anywhere to get practice drills. There's all kinds of sites and books and whatnot. It will be harder to put together a practice using a non-linear approach, a more ecological approach to your practices. That doesn't mean you forego things like the in-betweens and things like doing some kind of embedding. How do you embed skills instruction into your practices? And this is back to my point earlier about redefining the roles of coaches in practice, about the guide on the side, where, if I'm the head coach and I've got, Rick Puttock and Tom Malloy as assistants, that doesn't sound right at all. But anyway, I've got these two, high-powered individuals as assistants. When the kids are doing their game and I'm running this game, they are off to the side asking questions of the kids. Rick is dealing with the forwards, Tom's dealing with the defensemen. What could you have done differently? What is the method we're trying to do in our approaches? In other words, we're coaching the kids who are waiting to go on. And we still need to talk about, when you're holding your stick, why are you holding your stick with your hands so close together? Shouldn't they be a little bit further apart? We can embed those things, but coaches are very impatient. They don't know how to do that. We have to show them how to do that. It's the classic storytelling approach. It's, it's show versus tell. Wally, I'm going to send you my list of in-betweens. Feel free to share them with everybody.
Please do.
Sure.
I'll share it with everybody. And you mentioned a must listen to YouTube site.
Oh, that's Hockey Eastern Ontario's YouTube site. I guess if you just plug in Google Hockey Eastern Ontario YouTube, they've got a couple of speakers on there. Stuart Armstrong is one. Who else they got? They got Edward Coughlin. Rob Gray was on, or is coming on. What's the date today? He's coming on. Rob Gray is from Toronto. He teaches at Arizona State. Ted Suko. How do you pronounce Ted's last name? Sweet Conan? Sweet Conan? He's coming on to talk about skill acquisition. And that's the kind of knowledge that coaches need to be made aware of. I think it's really good stuff. Really, really good stuff.
Now, listen, I want to do when Dean does his research and you're doing your SEEP program.
Yeah.
I always simplify it to Tom Malloy. Let the game teach. And one of the things about presentation is the game teaches. When they play, they're going to learn to turn right and left because they're going to have to.
To a certain degree. Yeah.
But if we can deliberately help them try those things, they'll be better in the game. And that's the essence of it. I'm going to, Richard, have you heard of Bill Beanie? Because this guy got it before you got it, and I got it, and Tom got it. So I'm going to get Tom to speak about Bill Beanie, a little bit of his background, the presentations you've heard on him. He is the guru of, I think, what we're talking about from many, many, many years ago. Tom, go ahead.
Well, Bill Beanie, he's from Middlebury College, and they won the small college championship over and over. And he uses games. His practice is almost all games, and they have restrictions on him, and it's all about the support. He has a few. I listened to him about 5 years ago in Copenhagen, I think it was. He was talking about how he uses the games, and just they play with the principles of support, and he does really well. I think he's a mentor for the coaches there now, but he's been using games basically since he started coaching. I think he coached another sport before he coached hockey, and so he's pretty well known.
Is he still coaching, Tom?
I think he's a mentor. I have his presentation, I think, on my OneDrive. I copied it with my telephone because I wanted to. He referenced our ABC book because we game so much, and I talked to him a few times, during the conference. So
you have his contact information.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I got his email address.
Yeah. So that what we're doing is, it may be new and different because we've been doing the things the same way over such a long time. This is called radical, and it really isn't. It's let them play and they'll figure it out.
When you said Billy Beanie, I was thinking of, is it Billy Bean who was the Oakland Athletics guy in Moneyball, the movie Moneyball, the Brad Pitt played?
He was, but this is Bill Beanie.
Oh, Beanie. Okay, all right.
EY at the end.
All right.
Yeah, Tom recorded his message, and I'm not sure, Tom, if you can find that on a YouTube link and pass it on to us, but he does
I don't have it on YouTube. I just have it on my OneDrive.
Yeah. He points Tom out because this is maybe it was in Copenhagen. Every clinic he's ever been at, he's seen Tom at, and this was you. Tom used to go to every world championship. Incidentally, Tom, are you still going?
Well, ask the WestJet pilots, because I'm supposed to leave on Tuesday to Latvia, and that's when they might go out on strike. So
Oh, geez.
I paid for my son and I paid for the tickets, and a guy from Salzburg. He's from Toronto, but he's been living in Salzburg the last 15 years. He's bought the tickets. I've got the plane tickets. My son's going with me, and we've got a B&B. So we put all the money out. Now I don't know if we're going or not.
You know, when
And
we're
it
talking,
happened to be last COVID shut down my last trip to Switzerland, and I still haven't got the money from Iceland Air, over $1,000. So it's hard to get the money back once you just give it to somebody. I'll tell you that. But I want to go to Latvia. That's where Canada's playing, and plus Finland's so expensive, and the conference costs about $500, and I'm not coaching and bringing in a lot of money anymore, so cut my expenses. Plus, I've been to Finland a dozen times. Latvia is supposed to be, Riga is supposed to be really nice, and and my son's never been to one. I want him to go to some of the games there with all the chanting in the stands, and everybody, wears their jerseys and they're partying in the old towns after, and it's quite an experience.
can I just throw in a discussion I had, Wally, after the session that night? We reconvened for part 2 at a local beer and wings place.
Always the best place.
Absolutely, Rick.
Get more information there.
Yeah. Well, there were only 4 of us, so the rest of the guys
okay.
just, but so it was the president of the association, the development guy, Tony, and a guy named Steve, who I'd worked with when I was working in Oshawa, who runs the program for the younger kids, for the 7-8-year-olds, 6, 7, 8, I think it's U9 group. And we had put together this program 3 years ago when the cross ice came in with the U9 program, the pathways and whatnot. So Steve's background is entirely as a technician, not like an expert technician, but a drill guy type of thing. And he tried to take me to task on, well, I've got these 7 and 8-year-olds that are our inaugural, competitive level kids, and we're trying to do this skill stuff. I said, Steve, after listening to this for 2.25 hours, now you're asking me about that, really? And he said, well, I really think we need to do this kind of thing. I said, okay, are they game like? Are the activities competitive? He said some are. I said, I'm just asking you to think about it. He says, I don't know if I buy this. I said, and I don't know if I know that you buy it, but it doesn't matter. What I'm suggesting is, if you try it, what will happen? Do you think the kids are better doing the 6 stations you set up, where they're doing it each 3 times or 4 times? Go behind the net, do a stop, come out in front of the net, because the net is an object, could be a box. And he does a great job. He's outstanding. He's an older guy. He's in his 50s. Well, older is relative, right? But he's terrific with kids. He's terrific with the coaches. He mentors the newer coaches. He does a superb job, and they pay him, which is fantastic. I brought that in. But he's stuck on, they have to be shown this point by point skill stuff, and they get 3 or 4 reps. Then there's, get 4 kids at each station, and we move on to the next station. And it's a hard sell. It's a really hard sell. So I just kind of backed off. I said, Steve, all I'm saying is, you try it and let me know how it goes, or invite me out to watch, and we can work with it. He says, well, maybe I can make 3 stations competitive. Well, if you believe the 3 stations will be competitive and that will be worthwhile, why wouldn't you make all 6 competitive? I don't understand. So
That's the dilemma of anybody that tries to mentor coaches.
Yes.
At least that's been my experience.
Yes,
you can
you're
have
right.
all of the good information that you can muster,
Yes.
but they have their ways and they have their biases, and you have to find a way to, or at least I feel you have to find a way to get them to, as you
Right.
say, give it a try. Just prove it right or prove it wrong, but give it a shot.
I had on my podcast a couple of months ago a guy named Raymond Verheyen, who is a very well-known Dutch soccer guy, guru type of approach to teaching to coaching. It took 5 months to get him on the podcast because he was so busy. He's traveling all over the world running these clinics, and he's monetized. He's making a living out of teaching, the approach that he uses called CDEF: communication, decision making, execution of decision making, and fitness.
What's his
And
name again, Richard? Sorry.
Raymond Verheyen. If you go to fcevolution.com, so that's all strung together, fcevolution.com. His stuff is brilliant. He came on the podcast and I threw this at him and I said, this is back in February, I guess it was. And I said, okay, Raymond, understanding full well the message you're trying to share with everybody, what we hear in hockey is the drill approach. And he broke down, he's very matter of fact in his approach. You have to remove the emotion from it. What is the foundation for the arguments being made against it? When you remove the emotion, remove your own experience as a player from 20, 30, 40 years ago or more, and look at what does the research tell us? What do we know is true? And approaching from that aspect. So that's what I've been trying to do out here, is trying to remove everybody's emotional bias, which is really hard. I played junior, the three most dangerous words in coaching. I played junior. Therefore, yeah, but we know how children acquire skills. We know how children learn, whether they're 8 years old or 18 years old. So why aren't we applying these? Well, because I don't like it. I don't agree with it. Why? What's the foundation of your disagreement? I suggest you look him up. His stuff is fantastic. Really, really good. Something we can definitely do between Tom's stuff and Raymond Verheyen and Rob Gray and Doug Lemov, with all these people providing all this information. Coaching has to take a different turn. It just has to.
Are they real serious coaches going to be the only ones that tap into those things?
The way I look at it, and the way, I talked about this when I was on the Sharks call back in March, Wally. The president of the association said, if we can get 5 coaches to go, we're doing well. 5 coaches means 85 players. So there will be a bunch who will come in August, including ones who couldn't come to the April presentation. And we'll break it down, and I've already told the president that you're going to have to order breakfast or pizza or something, because we're not going to be there for an hour. We're going to sit down for a good 3 or 4 hours and hash out how you can apply this. And if only 4 coaches do it, you go into that particular facility in Oshawa where I held this, and there's 4 pads in there. People go around and watch what's going on and going, that's the most unusual practice I've ever seen. But the other component that I threw at them was, this is all well and good, but you have to educate the parents on what's going on. You cannot, parents who themselves are blinded by their own history and biases will look at an activity or games-based approach and go, what is it? My kid's not learning how to break out. My kid's not learning how to play a 3-on-2 reverse at the blue line, regroups. They're 10 years old. They should be able to do that. Then we have to educate the parents. That's a major part of the process, or should be anyway, I think.
You talk about parents. I'm doing an HP evaluation at a prep school. It's midget double A caliber players. The coach I'm evaluating is a young assistant who's taken his courses and he needs his HP high performance certification. And I go on the bench and I'm watching them play. And in their end, they were so spread out with defensively, they had no clue. The puck would be in the corner, and the far winger on the defensive side was on the wall waiting for a breakout. They didn't even have possession. And I tried to point this out to him as sort of being a visible, cardinal kind of thing to teach at this level. And he said to me, well, they should have known that by the time they were in U10. So the pass the buck concept, here you are dealing with a high performance coach who doesn't see the fundamental essence of collapsing and shrinking down.
He doesn't know any better, though.
Yeah.
How would he know any better? Where would he find that out from?
So given my age and experience, I suggested if he wanted to pass, he better demonstrate some learning during my time there because he was in trouble. And, we went in between periods and I convinced the staff to use the Socrates method, where between periods they would ask themselves, what did we do well? What do we need to do better? Then they would go in the room and ask the kids. And when they asked the kids, what do we need to do better? The captain spoke up. We have to get better at our end. We don't know what the hell we're doing. So talk about a teachable moment for this young high performance coach.
Right. And better at what, though?
Yeah.
We're having trouble in our own end, but what needs to be better? So what are we doing in practice that leads to this particular problem? What's the technical problem solving that says, all right, we're lousy in our own zone. Okay, I get it. All right, well, that's fine. Good call. But lousy at what? Now I have to figure out how to fix that in practice under a constraints-led environment where, breakouts begin with a puck transition.
Yep.
You got to regain possession, get into position, and away you go.
Would that be surprising to you, Richard, or is that the norm at that HP level?
Oh, it's the norm for all coaches. It's the norm for all coaches. They don't know what they don't know. Like I've immersed myself in this stuff for the last few years, and I can't expect coaches to have the time or inclination to do it because I didn't do it when I first started coaching. So I see myself as sort of the purveyor of news of what's going on in coaching. And I say, guys, like I said in Oshawa, I'm providing you this information. I'm going to provide suggestions on what we can do with that information. You have to filter out what is appropriate for you or your age group based on your skills and experience and see how you can shape it to your needs. I don't expect you to know all this stuff. I don't expect you to read all these theses, and I said theses, not theses. I said, to read all these theses. I don't expect you to read all this stuff and understand it and be able to do something with it. I'll help you with that. Just be open-minded. They don't know.
I've given up, Richard, worrying about, what we're talking about is really X's and O's, delivery. And I've found that letting them play games, no interference with too much thinking and teaching, but the ethical management of how you coach. That precedes everything else. So I've given up thinking I can make a difference with coaches like you are using this SEEP approach. But I find I can make suggestions while they're doing practice and give them ideas. My problem is I have too many ideas and I can't shut up.
Well, there's no such thing as too many ideas. Remember, the coaches we are when we started I started coaching in Montreal in 1971. I was a prodigy. I was 4 years old. So we had nothing in 1971. The Hockey Canada Clinic was 30 hours long. That was level 1. It was Monday nights, 3 hours a night for 10 weeks with Dave Draper was the coach at Loyola in Montreal, and he taught the program. That was it. There was nothing else. There were no books. There was no videos. There was nothing. So we are in a position now. We are the leaders of the game, and the likes of us four old farts here, we are in a position to be able to share all these ideas and help the next 2 generations of coaches improve their skills. Like the wealth of knowledge in just the 4 of us who are left on the call is astounding.
Well, we'll keep on, I call it bullshit baffling brain sometimes, but Rick, go ahead.
Well, just to hitchhike on some of the comments here, and Richard's, that where would they know it from? How would they know this stuff?
Right.
And years ago, and I took to the idea of you need to assess your group at the start of the year to determine just what their level of knowledge, level of experience is. I put it on a scale of 1 to 10. You may feel because they're midget AAA, which is the top level I worked at, that they should know pretty much everything when they get there. But a lot of them are still down at the 2 level because of the background they have. They may have high skill, but they don't have high understanding of the game or a high level of ability to interpret and make decisions, to the hockey IQ thing. So and when I'm mentoring coaches now, that's one of the points I'm trying to stress. Figure out what your group knows and don't start in the middle. Start at the bottom. So do they know how to skate? Do they know how to handle a puck? Do they know the mechanics of passing? And I'm serious about getting right down to the nuts and bolts. That may fly in the face of some people, maybe yourself too, Richard, that says we don't need to spend practice time doing this. But in my opinion, I feel I need to know where they're at before I start filling in some of the gaps for them. And I need to find that at the lowest common denominator and build from there. And the process is relatively quick once you give people the fundamentals to work with, that they'll progress and catch up to the rest of the group. Your top end guys probably know more than the guys that haven't had that same level of experience. So
we have done,
and I found that to be quite a useful approach.
I mean, if I'm king of the world here in Canada with Hockey Canada, when I become chairman next year, I'd be looking at hiring the likes of you guys and the other people who are on the call who are in Canada, and saying, all right, we're going to have a think tank here. What do we have to do to improve our coaching? So while your approach, Rick, or Tom's or Wally's might be somewhat different from what I would do, the essence of it is the same. We need to educate our coaches better. We need to inform them better. We need to make them better aware. We need to inform parents better. And we need to have strong leadership. So there has to be a recognition that the people who have been around the game for decades, I mean, look at the number of years of experience, just the 4 of us. We're talking over 200 years of coaching experience-ish. You can't put that out to pasture. I refuse to be put out to pasture. Some people may want to put me out to pasture with the sheep and the goats, but I'm sorry. I feel that I have too much to offer, as you do, and we may differ in a few things, and that's fine. I don't care. That's fine.
Just a story when I was in Copenhagen, I'm sitting in the front row at the end, and this guy's presenting, and he just stops and he looks at me and says, "How old are you?" And that was 5 years ago. So next one I go to is going to be unbelievable.
How much of it is generational? Like, I feel I can't win. I can't get started because I'm too old.
Bullshit.
No, but it's that credibility with the people you're working with. The gap is almost too great for me.
No, you're. I'm sorry, I disagree 100%. The credibility is in not just in the messaging, but in the experience. Just take one component of what you do, Wally, and look at the mission statement exercise, which should be a compulsory portion of any coaching clinic. Okay, just that alone, and you take all the stuff that we do, like I'm promoting Tom stuff like crazy. I should get a cut of from his website or something if he charged.
I don't
for it.
get any for it because I can't.
Well, okay.
I'm
Well,
stealing
anyway.
stuff from other people, so I can't
But
charge.
the stuff that we do is priceless, and the coaches want it. I show up in Oshawa. I haven't been there in nearly 4 years. 27 coaches showed up, and there could have been 40 had it not been for their pre-tryout skates. They want the information. Coaches, like my friend Rick Ledouceur, I think a couple of you guys know him. He is now the executive director of Prairie Storm Minor Hockey, which is just outside Regina. And he's trying to institute a coach development program there. They've had nothing, ever. And they're just astounded at the stuff that he wants to provide them, including the SEEP program, either in Zoom or in person or however he's going to do it. And the people on the board go, this is fantastic. This is great. People want it. It's the leaders of the game in the associations or in Hockey Canada that have to look at the experienced folks across the country and go, we have to use that information. We have to use those brains. Have to. And if they don't want to, I'm going to provide it anyway.
Have you not burnt bridges?
Oh, yeah.
Like, I think I've burnt too many bridges.
Oh, yeah. I've burnt lots of bridges, and I have to learn to swim really well to get
That's
across
why
those rivers.
the one thing about people working in those positions is they're really outstanding at communicating at that level with one another. Now, whatever the Peter Principle means applies.
You can't be in the game as long as we have, fellas. I'm sure you would agree. We've been around a long time. And there are players who played for us who went, I'll never play for that guy again. And there are others who would say, my God, best coach I've had in ever. It doesn't matter what role we play. We have burnt bridges. I've burnt certainly my share, including the two organizations out here. But Ontario, the OMHA and the OHF is a completely closed shop. They don't want to deal with anybody except their own favorites. Okay, fine. I'll go off and do my own thing. The hell with you. When you put this on YouTube, please leave that out. But I feel I have something to offer. People can disagree with the content, fine, or the approach, that's fine too. But all of us have something really valuable to offer. We should be offering it. I plan to write a letter to, well, you guys know Cassie Campbell, of course, I don't, but Hugh Fraser, who's the current chair. Hugh Fraser was the current chair of Hockey Canada for a year. And I know Hugh from Ottawa. I coached his kids, and his ex-wife was my kid's teacher and so on. So I've known Hugh for 30 years. I plan to write a little note and say, I hope that when the new board comes in and you have advice for the new board, that they're going to put in some people on that board with a development vision. And I'm going to throw some names out at them. Yours will be among them. I said, the following people have been at the apex of development, including Dave King and Dean Holden and all these people for years. Why are they not right in there developing the program to educate our coaches?
Well, Tom had Cassie coach with him. I coached her, and I thought, oh boy, here's a chance, knowing her, to make influence things. And I have actually told her, Cassie, the most important thing that I would want done is the mission statement exercise. I just love to do it with you. But I don't know that it would be understood and valued to the degree where, okay, they're going to move forward with this because they can't mandate those things.
Well, maybe they
volunteer board.
mandate. USA Hockey has been mandating a whack of stuff, and they're doing just fine.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure. I think the way it's structured, in terms of branches and votes and selection and the isolation of every branch, there really is no pure trust and respectful communication
Correct.
going on between all parties.
Absolutely correct.
That's no criticism of them. It's just the reality of people caught up in their own worlds and their own departments doing things their own way, which are very good. But are they sharks? Are they keeping learning? Are they keeping swimming?
Well, you look at the names that I had in my presentation and the names that we throw around. There is not one Hockey Canada person that has been quoted or seen on YouTube or done a presentation where you go, wow, that's fantastic stuff. They're all either a European or American.
Yeah.
Every one of them.
Well, you know,
Scary.
I have to comment. I went to Sammy Joe Small talked about a goaltender school, Hockey Canada sponsored. I went to it. The following week, they had skills coaches from across Canada, Hockey Canada certified, come in.
Yeah, $1,500 a piece.
Yeah. And Corey McNabb and Dean Seymour ran an ice time that was the best I'd ever seen in terms of advanced tactical purpose of skills for defensemen along the blue line with a puck offensively and what they were doing. It blew me away. So they're doing great things. It's just a matter of just getting everyone to appreciate whatever is great and taking it on to another level. But anyway, I'm not sure what else to say or do, but
Well, I'm going to comment there, Wally, if I can jump in.
yeah.
Like a lot of what Hockey Canada is, and you and I have had this discussion before, a lot of what their focus is on high performance. It's
Right.
not on where the high performance athletes come from.
Right.
That
100%.
has been more than magnified in the last couple of years with all of the nonsense that's gone on relative to Hockey Canada. But everything that's involved in all of those scandalous discussions has to do with high performance. I haven't seen much, if any, comment relative to the grassroots, to the minor hockey side of things. That's where I think
That's one of the reasons I
Hockey
do
Canada.
my web.
Sorry, Tom?
It's one of the reasons I started my website. There was really nothing for the guy coaching kids hockey,
Correct.
Agreed.
you know. And they didn't like it at all, I'll tell you that. Like we did our book, and there was this perfect practice book from a guy in Saskatchewan, and the Czech something else about Czech hockey, and the guy in charge of Hockey Canada, you know, at that time said, well, I'm not going to support your book because I believe it's in competition with our Nike program. And that, you know, so that's the feedback I got from them.
If it's their idea, it's a good idea. If it's anyone else's, they don't really want to have much to do with it. But if you hang in there long enough, it may show up in a year or two under their name, slightly disguised.
Yeah, well, you know, like we talked to the big shots 25 years ago, Johanny and I, and they listened to him because he was from Finland. We were at Father Bauer, you know, and that's where their office was. And they kind of politely listened, but you could tell that they're glazed over. They weren't listening to anything. And they really didn't give him the time of day. And he's probably the most brilliant hockey guy I've ever talked to in my life. And, you know, because like you said, it wasn't their idea. So, and it was about games. And the US came out with all their game stuff, you know, later. But, you know, they didn't listen one iota to it. So,
See, Richard, that I believe what Tom was talking about, the best teaching progression of drills. This gets away from the seep done by Johanni on the ice with Tom at Father Bauer. I watched the best sequence I've ever seen for teaching puck hockey sense, passing and pass timing ever. To this day, I'm saying every team needs to do this sequence to teach support and timing that will translate into game situations. It's absolutely priceless. And he was there back in the day. I saw it. And I think I called Tom over and I just shook my head. I said, oh my God, did I pop into the rink at the right time or what? But that's sort of one of the things with girls hockey Calgary is going to be a cardinal sequence for coaches to play with. But what I'm discovering is they may not want to because they have their own ideas. So I'll worry more about the mission statement exercise because it'll bring the parents together and the board together, supporting the coaches to do what they can do. I think a coach has to go through that and come to you for, can you help me with this? We're not completing passes. And you know, Tom did something so simple as count passes last year. He didn't do that drill sequence, I suggest, but he just tracked pat completion. And the passing was like off the chart. So by letting them play games and keeping track of the number of completed passes in a conscious way, that was enough.
Yeah, that's one of the elements of one of the elements in the elements of doing a game-like approach is, you know, charting, you know, checks or passes or shots or whatever. But I mean, if from the macro level, the leaders of the game in this country have dropped the puck.
We'll go with puck.
Yeah, we'll go with puck. They just, there's no leadership. I mean, I've worked in 3 branches. Quebec, which was at, you know, at the top for years and years and years, and still is very, very progressive. HEO, but I was the top dog in HEO, so I made sure that we had progressive approaches and extra clinics for coaches and whatnot. And we created our own high performance before the new one came in. And then OMHA and OHF, which is just a vacuum. There's just nothing going on, nothing, zero, no air, zero. It's shocking. So
even the simple concept, like I learned about the 4 game playing rules from Johanni, because that's how the whole Finnish, you know, everything's organized there. So everything I do is based on the 4 game playing rules. And, you know, like it's really surprising that Hockey Canada hasn't taken that, because it basically is so logical.
well, sure it is. It makes sense. But
yeah,
that's why I'm saying they need to have people in that office with some vision, you know, as opposed to hiring people with a recreation specialist and you're going to stay there for a few years and, you know, you're going to make your salary, but you know, you have to toe the party line. Well, you know, I really fear for the future of the game in this country because it's becoming very expensive with all the development instructors and, you know, $250 an hour to teach skating. But the other thing we're seeing is an awful lot of outlaw leagues. There's a lot of them out here.
that's
Where
here too.
are out there. They're getting their insurance from the AAU in the US or from somewhere else. and they're splitting off and having full ice for 6-year-olds and doing all the stuff that has been traditional 50 years ago that we know is not appropriate now. And parents are running off to, there's a guy, former NHLer out here, Chris Versteeg. I don't know if you remember that name from the NHL. He retired a few
He
years
played in
ago.
Calgary his last few
Played
years.
in Calgary.
Right. Yeah. So he lives out my way. He lives a few blocks from me out here in Whitby. He started an outlaw league for 6 to 10-year-olds. Why? Because his kid is in that age group. They're playing full ice somewhere, and he's got a few dozen kids involved in the programming who are not playing in the normal organizations. And that has now really grown a lot. People are driving 45 minutes to an hour through Toronto traffic to get to an outlaw league for the kid to play in, some ex-pros vision. And it's not
It's
getting
more like
smaller.
the American model. That's what they do, right? I helped a guy in LA pick a AAA midget team, and there was kids there from all over the United States.
Yep, and they fly
I
them
know
in,
this
and
team.
like the GTHL with the ownership and the sponsorship and people owning, multiple teams. Like Zach Hyman's dad, Stuart, very wealthy guy, owns the junior A team out here in Markham, which is not too far from me. And if your name is not Hyman, you can't be involved with the team. Assistant coach is Hyman. The owner is Hyman. The development instructor is a young Hyman. He owned GTHL teams, so his boy Zach could play. Where is Zach ending up? The NHL, making a few million. It's crazy. So anyway,
So he's leveraging the name.
that's right. That's it.
Well, you know what drives me crazy is these NHLers now, they get mad and they're breaking their sticks. So that's what the kids are watching.
Right.
And the parents just, came up with $200, $300 to buy this bloody stick, and who do they imitate?
Yeah, I'm not proud to say that the $50 stick I bought 2 years ago in the Old Timers League I play in here, I still use.
Yeah.
Which tells you something about my shot. But so anyway, Wally, thanks for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Richard.
yeah.
Tom, I'm gonna badger you to get Bill Beanie on down the road, and hopefully WestJet doesn't go on strike. But keep me in the loop when you're going to go to watch the Wranglers practice, the AHL team.
Yeah, I think they have an optional one at the Dome today, and then they're going to play 2 home games. Then they're going to go to whoever they're playing, and they'll be in the road because they're doing 2 at home, then 3 on the road.
Same as before,
3
yeah.
5 series. Was it?
Yeah.
Well, it's nice to be able to watch such impressive tactical practices, purposeful practices at that level. But we want to keep helping the minor hockey programs and hopefully make an impact and be a bigger part of making a difference. So
we scared everybody off though on the call.
okay. All right.
Thanks, guys.
Take care, you guys.
Take care.
Tom,
Thank you again, Richard.
Bye-bye. Take care. Thanks.
bye.
Bye.